Welcome to the Surgical Edge podcast for surgical insights, reviews, discussions, and to stay updated. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we distill complex info into clear, actionable insights. Fast, helping you stay informed.
Glad to be here.
So today, we're diving headfirst into something you probably see, pretty often. Picture this. You're reviewing a CT scan, maybe an ultrasound, for something totally unrelated, vague abdominal pain, maybe, or a follow-up.
Right, the usual incidental finding scenario.
Exactly. And then you spot it, tucked away in the appendix, an appendiceal faecolith. And that immediate thought, maybe even before you fully register it, is...
Does this thing just go away on its own?
Precisely. Okay, let's unpack this. Does it just disappear?
And that's really the core question for our deep dive today. We're looking into the natural history of these incidental appendiceal faecoliths.
Okay.
And maybe a bit surprisingly, what we find is a real lack of solid data on whether they spontaneously resolve.
Huh. Really?
Yeah. So our mission today for you, the clinician listening, is to kind of cut through that uncertainty. We want to distill what the literature actually tells us.
Right.
Help you navigate this really common scenario with more confidence, even when the data itself shows us where the gaps are.
Okay, let's jump straight into that. The clinical conundrum. You spot the faecolith, patient feels fine, zero symptoms.
Classic incidentaloma situation.
Right. So your first instinct might be, it'll probably just pass or dissolve. Can we actually tell patients that? Is there evidence it's likely to just vanish without intervention?
It's such a natural question to ask, isn't it? We want to reassure people with facts.
Yeah, exactly. Given the timeline.
But here's the thing our deep dive really uncovered. There's basically no robust published data that quantifies how often these incidental faecoliths just disappear from the appendix.
No data, like at all.
Well, not in the sense of tracking resolution rates. The research focus almost entirely is on the link between faecoliths and the risk of acute appendicitis.
Okay. Risk prediction, not resolution tracking.
Precisely. So the studies aren't really set up to answer, how often does this just go away on follow-up imaging, or is it passed spontaneously? We just don't have those numbers.
Wow. Okay, that's actually quite surprising. So telling a patient, don't worry, it'll probably be gone next time we look, that's not really evidence-based.
Unfortunately, no. It's an assumption, maybe a reasonable sounding one, but not backed by data quantifying resolution. It definitely leaves a bit of a void when we're counseling.
It really does. So, okay, if we can't track their disappearance, what do we know? This is where it gets interesting, right? Because even without that piece, there must be information that shapes how we manage these findings.
Absolutely. And what we do know is actually quite informative for practice. First off, it's really crucial to understand these faecoliths. They're found incidentally quite often in perfectly healthy appendices.
Okay.
So just seeing one doesn't automatically mean disease. It's not an absolute predictor. That's key for patient conversations, managing that initial reaction.
Right. So it's not necessarily smoke signaling fire. It could just be part of the normal variation almost.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
And adding to that, the reports consistently show faecoliths pop up in both scenarios. Patients with acute appendicitis, sure, but also in patients with absolutely no symptoms.
Okay, so presence in both sick and well individuals.
Exactly, which further supports this idea they can just be, passengers. Yeah. Incidental findings chilling out in the appendix without causing trouble. Their presence alone isn't the whole story.
That's important. It pushes back against that immediate impulse to just get rid of it. So how common are these incidental passengers then? Do we have any numbers on prevalence in asymptomatic folks?
We do have some data, mostly from smaller studies looking at appendices removed incidentally, during other surgeries, not for suspected appendicitis.
Okay, so healthy appendices removed for other reasons.
Right, and in those studies, the prevalence of faecoliths was actually pretty high. We're talking somewhere in the range of 32% to 40%.
32 to 40%. Wow.
Yeah, nearly a third to almost half of these incidentally removed, otherwise healthy appendices had a faecolith inside.
That's much higher than I might have guessed.
It is striking. But, and this is the really crucial bit, even though we know they were there when the appendix was removed, these studies don't tell us what would have happened to those faecoliths over time if the appendix had been left in place. Did they disappear? Did they stay? We just don't know their long-term fate from that data.
Okay, so common finding, but their natural history regarding resolution is still a black box, essentially.
Pretty much.
So if they're found so often, and we can't say if they disappear, What is the literature focused on then? What's the guidance for managing these incidental findings?
Right, so instead of chasing the faeculus on imaging to see if it dissolves.
Which we now know isn't really supported by data.
Exactly.
Huh?
The focus shifts entirely. The literature strongly emphasizes monitoring the patient for symptoms or signs that appendicitis might be developing.
Ah, okay. So clinician focus shifts from the static image to the dynamic patient.
Precisely. It's all about the clinical picture. Any changes the patient reports or you find on exam, not about whether the faecolith looks different on the next scan. It's a subtle but really important shift in mindset.
That makes sense. And that leads us straight into the practical side, the clinical implications. This is what really matters for doctors and surgeons listening. So what does all this mean for you, for how you talk to patients, decide on next steps when you see one of these things on a scan? It sounds like there's a path forward despite the missing resolution data.
Absolutely. Even with that gap, the clinical approach becomes clear. Point number one, and it's critical. We just can't tell patients, based on current evidence, that an incidental faecolith is likely to disappear over time.
Right. No evidence-based timeline for resolution.
Correct. So managing expectations right from the start is key.
So what for us clinicians is we advise vigilance, but for symptoms, not for the faecolith itself to vanish. How do we frame that without causing unnecessary anxiety?
That's exactly it. Even without the disappearance data, regular clinical review is generally the advice when an incidental faecolith is found.
Okay. Regular review, but focused on the patient's status.
Yes. It's not about getting repeat scans just to check on the faecolith. It's about closely monitoring the patient for any signs that it might be becoming clinically significant. And the reason for this monitoring is that potential, albeit low risk, of future appendicitis.
Right. The known risk factor, even if small.
Exactly. So you need to be transparent. Explain that the concern isn't necessarily the faecolith just sitting there, but the small possibility it could trigger inflammation down the line.
So counseling is about education on red flags.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Educate them on what to watch for. The classic right lower quadrant pain, nausea, vomiting, fever, and advise seeking prompt care if those occur. It's not about creating an expectation that the thing itself will just dissolve and disappear.
That really clarifies the decision-making. It shifts the focus beautifully from the image to the patient's experience. Watchful waiting for symptom development rather than expecting imaging changes in the faecolith.
Yes.
That's practical, actionable. It helps answer that immediate, okay, what do I do question when you see the finding.
Exactly right. And this understanding really guides that whole conservative management versus intervention discussion. If the patient is asymptomatic,
Yeah.
management isn't about rushing to take out the appendix just because there's a faecolith there to prevent something that might never even happen.
Right. Avoid unnecessary surgery.
It's about empowering the patient, giving them the knowledge about signs and symptoms, advising prompt medical attention if needed. We acknowledge the potential for it to become symptomatic, but its mere presence, symptom-free, doesn't automatically demand intervention.
A patient-centered approach. Respecting the known risks, but avoiding intervention based solely on an incidental finding with an unknown resolution course.
That sums it up perfectly.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap the key takeaway here. Incidental appendiceal faecoliths, yeah, they're common findings. We see them a lot.
We do.
But the current medical literature, it offers basically no clear answer on whether they spontaneously disappear or resolve. The studies just haven't tracked that specific outcome.
Correct. No predictable rate or timeline available from the data.
So instead, the focus for clinicians, based on what we do know, stays firmly on vigilant symptom monitoring. It's about that known, even if low risk, of future appendicitis.
Manage the patient, not just the scan finding.
Manage the patient, not the image. Love that. So that leaves us with a final thought then.
I think it does. This whole deep dive really shines a light on a growing challenge for you, the clinician. We live in an era of ever-increasing incidental findings thanks to advanced imaging.
True, we see more and more unexpected things.
So the question becomes, how do we best educate our patients, manage their understandable anxiety around these discoveries? Especially when, like with faecoliths, their natural history specifically, resolution is largely uncharted territory. Yet they still carry some known, even if small, potential risk.
That's a really nuanced conversation, isn't it? How to communicate uncertainty alongside potential risk without over or underselling either.
It is. And it's a conversation we're likely going to be having more and more often as our imaging gets better and better. Definitely something to keep thinking about in clinical practice.
Thank you for listening to the Surgical Edge podcast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Help us grow and deliver even more relevant surgical content by pressing the support button. Your contribution truly makes a difference. And don't forget to share with us your advice, feedback, and the topics you would like us to include.